Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
Welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. Thank you again for welcoming us into your home. I'm your co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine, here with your host, Mr. Lee Martin, and our guest today will be talking about her trials to triumphs. So Lee, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm just wanting to get into our program today because our guest, Ms. Mikayla Scott, has so much information to share with us, Florence, and I am really looking forward to gathering this information and sharing it with our viewing and listening audience, which we once again want to thank for continuing to join us and support us as we share information about the National Federation of the Blind, about our citizens throughout the state and agencies throughout the state and country that assist individuals that are blind, visually impaired, and print challenged. So one of the programs that we really want to talk about is a program of the National Federation of the Blind. And we are the National Federation of the Blind Newsline. We're an extension of the National Federation of the Blind, and this is their program. We're also sponsored by the Indiana Library, State Library, that is, and we're wanting to thank them for their efforts in our endeavors. Florence, you want to tell our viewing and listening audience what NFB Newsline is?
Surely. NFB Newsline is a free audio information service for the blind print challenge community, which gives us access to newspapers, magazines, TV guide listings, Walmart, Target circulars. It gives us access to breaking news, and it's right there at our fingertips. It's free. Again, it is free, and we can access this service various ways. For instance, I use an iPhone and I use it on the app, and it allows me to read my newspapers, magazines, wherever I go. In addition, I have access to another free service, and that is the KNFB Reader. And what that does, it allows me to read my mail and other documents independently. I love the KNFB Reader. That's one of my favorite tools. We can also access the free service through the use of an Alexa, the digital player from the Talking Book and Braille Library, the Victor Reader Stream, Android and home phone, as well as your computer. So Lee, the NFB Newsline is a great tool. And again, it's right there at our fingertips.
It's right there at our fingertips. And to add to that, you can read over 500 publications. You can read international publications as well as national publications. You can read newspapers within your state, and you can also visit numerous states. We're in just about every state. And it's just a service that gives you access to information. And once again, I'd like to state that informed citizens make informed decisions. So there'll be information scrolling across the screen and also in our commercials. Please get that information and get in touch with us so that we can get you signed up for this fantastic service and you can be informed. So we're going to take a short pause and we're going to come back with our guests. Stay tuned.
I just graduated college as a blind student. How can I independently find job listings?
Thanks to the National Federation of the Blind, visually impaired Hoosiers can hear newspapers, circulars, and magazines from across the globe.
It is a fantastic service.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduce the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. And as Lee mentioned, today's guest is Miss Mikayla Scott. And Mikayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Florence.
Now, Mikayla, today we're going to talk a little bit about your journey. And we're going to talk mostly about retinitis pigmentosa, which is your diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
And we'll talk about, well, for instance, first, where were you born? Let's start there.
I grew up in Marion, Indiana, just north of Indianapolis.
Okay, and are you your only child, Mikayla?
No, I have a brother who is younger than I am.
Okay. And now, at what age then were you diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa?
It was sort of a long journey. I don't think I was actually diagnosed until early 2015 during my sophomore year of high school, but I noticed problems that were really starting in more like 8th grade.
Okay, now you said problems. Now, what type of problems were you experiencing at that point?
At first, it was just migraines and what would be encompassed with migraines with aura. I was seeing colors or lines a lot of the time, but it was only in extremely bright light. And then I noticed that I wasn't noticing things that were to my peripheral. Night blindness, I participated in pep band and played the clarinet. So when we would go to football games in the evening, I would have trouble walking to and from the field towards the evening after pep band had finished, or even seeing the music in front of me. And that's when I started to notice that maybe it's not just migraines that were my issue.
Well, then what I want to find out about that then, Mikayla, you were having those issues and not really knowing as a child. How did that impact you then? Were you stressed by it, or how did that impact you?
I was absolutely stressed. I remember a lot of the time sitting on the couch, and I wouldn't be able to, read the books that I wanted to read. I was a very avid reader. I couldn't watch TV shows. We had a big picture window in my house, and the light was most of the time too much for me. So I would sit under a blanket, and I wouldn't do much during the day. And it led me to lose interest in a lot of things. And even cooking started to become an issue, where I would drop things or, burn my fingers accidentally. And that's when we noticed that this probably isn't migraines anymore. It's, something dealing with my vision loss. And that's probably why I was getting migraines instead.
Now, Mikayla, is there anyone else in your family who had experienced vision loss?
No, not at all.
Okay, so retinitis pigmentosa was not in your family history until that you knew of, until your
Correct.
diagnosis? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, Mikayla, we know that with retinitis pigmentosa, that one of the symptoms that they look for is night blindness. Now, when would you say that you first realized that you have had night blindness?
Around the same time that I started getting the migraines, actually, probably in 8th or 9th grade. And then from there, it progressed and got much worse during my sophomore year.
Okay, now your parents.
Yes.
Now, how did your eye condition at that point affect your parents?
It affected my mother quite a bit. She was constantly searching for answers. I saw an ophthalmologist early on. I saw someone to deal with migraines. That's what I was originally diagnosed with, was just migraines. She fought hard to look for answers. I remember that she was up constantly through the night trying to find out regarding my symptoms, what I could be experiencing, what it could be, which doctors we could go to. And it led us to Riley Children's Hospital and also Dr. Laura Windsor out of Hartford City. I got to eventually see her, and she's finally the one that diagnosed me.
So with all of this challenges that your family faced and you faced, you still persevered, and
Yes.
you still found your sense of independence. As we introduced this show, trials to independent, trials to triumphs, and you have really shown signs of triumphing over this. Now I know that Florence also copes with RP, and as I learned from both of you, that there's numerous different types of RP out there, and can you guys kind of expound on your different experience, your experience, Florence, and hers as well? You got anything you found in common?
Well, I'm going to say, as far as my diagnosis it sounds different than Mikayla's. For instance, my diagnosis is with recognized pigmentosis considered dominant, and it's dominant because in my family it has come from generation to generation. I know that my grandfather, my dad, my brothers, and we all have been diagnosed with recognized pigmentosa. And then again, it has carried over to my children and grandchildren. So in my family, it's pretty dominant. There's a lot of different, there's a lot of differences, I'll put it like that, in diagnosis of recognized pigmentosis, as far as I know, because just as there's different degrees of blindness, in which I'm sure Mikayla can talk about in her case. So Mikayla, now as far as your diagnosis with recognized pigmentosa, how is your acuity, let's say, or your peripheral? How would you say it differs than another's?
So for me personally, my peripheral is almost non-existent. I believe I'm down to 35% field of vision. My acuity is still greatly intact. I'm only now starting to notice changes in acuity with needing new glasses or bifocals practically every year rather than every 2. So that is slowly beginning to get worse. But I still do greatly rely on my acuity. I can still read books. I can still walk around. I use a cane so I don't look at my feet, so I don't hit my head on things. I can actually look up to walk properly. I do still, I play video games. I don't use screen readers at the moment because I still have so much of my acuity left, because RP is a progressive vision loss. It's not that you suddenly get diagnosed and you can't see any longer. Some people may go completely blind, some people may not. It's purely up to genetics and how RP plays a role inside of your body.
Exactly. Now, have you experienced any issues with depth perception at this point, Mikayla?
Absolutely. One of the moments that kind of defined for me that I was losing my vision that took a hit on me was regarding my depth perception. I was just cooking mac and cheese one day and I thought that the counter was right in front of me. And when I went to place the bowl down on the counter, I thought that I was directly in front of the counter, but I was actually much further back. And I just let go of the bowl thinking it would be on the counter and I dropped it right to the floor.
Well, I tell you, Mikayla, I've done that a number of times, and you learn how to manage that over a period of time. We're going to take us a short pause and we're going to come right back with more information from Mikayla. And she has so much more to share. So stay tuned.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read Jerusalem Post too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free. If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I am a CFP practitioner, and I happen to be blind. I rely on NFB Newsline to keep me current with Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times.
Hoosiers can hear Indiana magazines, circulars, national magazines, and information from across the globe. Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
To this segment of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana, and we are speaking with Miss Mikayla Scott.
Yes, Mikayla, it's been so interesting talking with you thus far. And I tell you, you moved to Indianapolis from Marion, Indiana. And I wanted to know, how has moving to Indianapolis changed your lifestyle, and what adaptive technologies do you receive in Indianapolis?
Well, so I went from Marion to Muncie to go to college and become more independent. And that's where I really got to work on a lot of my cane skills and the first interactions that I ever had with a public bus that would go through campus and go to Walmart and the mall. So I was able to get around. And then when I met my fiance and we moved to Indianapolis, where he is from, I finally got to start taking orientation mobility training. I got in touch with Voc Rehab, who have provided me with so much that was much better than I had in Marion, because where I come from, there's not a lot of low vision or visually impaired people. So it was very hard to get the assistance that I needed. And Bosma is here in Indianapolis, and I'm now going to start meeting with them to start to work on skills, maybe, in and around my home, or help with job opportunities and how I can grow for any adaptive technology that I may need in the future.
Okay, now you mentioned your fiance, and did you meet your fiance in college?
Yes, I did.
Now, was he aware of your retinitis pigmentosa?
Yes, he lived across the hall from my friend, so he often saw me with my cane. And I guess that didn't necessarily deter him at all. He, early on in our relationship, didn't quite know how to do sighted guides. So it was a great bonding experience. There was a lot of pulling me out of the way of people. And I would have to explain to him, don't do that. And since then, he's actually been able to be a part of a couple of orientation mobility training exercises and really started to learn sighted guide. And it's actually been pretty wonderful getting to see him grow in that area of our relationship and, be there to be inclusive in my lifestyle.
Okay. Now, as far as learning, tell me, Mikayla, how how would you say other people have received your condition with retinitis pigmentosa? Obviously you wear glasses and you seem to get around just fine. So how would you say that other people receive the condition?
Well, with my close family and friends, since they've been around me so often, they can see what I do and don't struggle with. But other people that I've come in contact with, they're very leery at first. Sometimes they think that it's just a joke or impersonating, more or less, because I wear glasses, especially children. They've come up to me and say, "You're not blind, you wear glasses," or like I have my sunglasses, and the sunglasses tend to serve me well. But with my regular prescription glasses, a lot of people begin to doubt, or they question it, and I just use it as an educational opportunity, more or less, to explain not everyone is completely blind. There is progressive sight loss. There are people that will lose their vision over time, and the cane is just an adaptive tool to help us, and I can still rely on what vision I have.
Mikayla, that's very interesting as we learn about our condition and how to transition into the various sight loss that we have. But myself, like being totally blind, I had to adapt to the cane. And that was difficult for me. And I wonder, how was that for you to adapt to the cane itself?
I was very excited when I first received my cane. I think I got my first one in January of 2015. I think it was the day of my diagnosis. They told me that I should get one and just start learning it. When I was in high school, I actually had an orientation mobility instructor come to my school during my lunch hour, or shortly after my lunch hour, and I would get to learn orientation mobility around my school just to start off with. But I didn't actually receive orientation mobility training until Indianapolis just last year in 2020, I believe. So I was living with a cane for about 5 years and I kind of had to learn it on my own for the most part. And it's been interesting, the journey from start to now with the cane.
Now, adjusting to vision loss is a transition. It is an adjustment. And what advice would you give someone else who was coping with vision loss, Mikayla?
Honestly, the best advice that I can give is to still be confident and still be independent. Don't worry about what other people think of you, especially if you do wear glasses. Don't try to hide yourself or rely maybe on wearing more like sunglasses to maybe look the part of a blind person, because people are going to judge you regardless. But if you're just yourself and you work on advocacy, if you like that, then do so. Wear your glasses, use your cane as you should. Don't put it away, or just really put yourself in the shoes of, this is me, and this is what helps me be independent.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mikayla, we're going to have a show one day where we're just talking about the different etiquettes of blindness. And we would love to have you come on and be on that little panel that we're going to have.
Absolutely.
To talk about this, because that's educational for everyone, even for those of us that are blind, on how to teach people to, like you said, travel with us, to talk with us, and just to understand that we're blind, but we're not out of our minds. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take a short pause, and we're going to come back with the conclusion of our show. Stay tuned.
I am a blind vendor, and one of the things that I truly miss is reading Vending Times magazine.
Hoosiers can hear Indiana magazines, circulars, national magazines, and information from across the globe. Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
It is a fantastic service.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
As I travel the nation, I read NFB Newsline.
I live in Valparaiso, Indiana, and I listen to my local news on NFB Newsline.
As a student, I enjoy reading current events on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
Welcome back to the conclusion of our show, and we're speaking with Miss Mikayla Scott. And Mikayla, what's one of your high points since losing your vision?
Honestly, not being restrained and still getting the chance to travel independently to Europe was probably one of the highest points of my life. I had a lot of fun, taking my cane and being with friends overseas and just being able to live and learn languages in Europe.
Well, Mikayla, I mean, you play sports. You like go ball?
Yes, I do.
And I tell you, that's a very rugged sport. And there's so much more. We're going to have to get you back on here to share some more of your adventures and some of your triumphs. You haven't let anything deter you, and you still have so much more to offer. And it has been my pleasure and the show's pleasure to have you with us today. And I know our viewing and listening audience have learned a lot. And when you come back to us, we're going to have so much more to share with them. So I want to thank you once again for your time and sharing with us.
Yes, thank you, Lee and Florence.
Thank you, Mikayla.
So we want to let our viewing and listening audience know we'll be back next week. And we trust that you will join us as we continue to educate our public and let people know that blindness is not what holds you back. Take good care of yourselves, and God bless.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org. or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.